So today we are having Stewart Hines talk to us about design. He's a designer here in Oklahoma City. So I'll go ahead and give him the floor.
Yeah. Hi. Let me get this thing going. Isn't technology great? All right. How's everybody doing? Are we good? In the back? Kim, we good? Oh no. I'll wait on these folks right here. Awesome. All right, how's everybody doing today? Like Carson said, my name's Stewart. I'm a designer living here in Oklahoma City. It's not always fun and glamorous, but it's good. So as we get started today, I thought it'd be a good time to tell a story, because story time is great. Everybody likes story time, especially my children. They like to have story time. So I thought I'd introduce what I'm going to talk about with a story. So back when I worked at 9 Collective, it was a little tiny software shop in Weatherford, Oklahoma. Who knows where Weatherford's at? Somebody? Oh, wow. More people than usual. So if you drive west an hour, you'll hit this little hole in the wall called Weatherford. They have a college, so they think they're important. But when I was working there at 9 Collective, we built software, and we built software specifically for the oil field industry, specifically for service companies that were disposal companies. So they would haul off solid and liquid waste. And they had all this really great jargon. So they would say, wow, I had like some feedback. That's awesome. So they'd have this great jargon. So they'd be like, hey, we're going to go around back and suck out a number 2. And that meant they were going to go take this giant hose and pull out like solid waste out of this tank, out of the bottom of this tank. So we had a hard time kind of like understanding them, right? And so basically, we started off building their operations system. And so it was basically electronic ticketing. It was like, person A is going to go to place C, and he's going to take truck Z and pump item I, right? And it's like combined all of that stuff, and we're going to go over to the rig. And so they would generate a lot of data when they did this, and they wanted to capture everything. And I mean everything. So they would capture everything from like who was going, and then like he had like his age and everything else, his favorite color, and you would have the company that was running the rig, and you would have the company man and like what he had for breakfast, and was the porta potty cleaned and stuff like that. Like you'd have all this crazy data that was just like cram packed into this stuff. Now, so can you visualize that? Can anybody visualize that? You just have like this screen, and it's just like jam-packed with like smart grids and tables and drop-downs and all sorts of stuff, and it was really hard to interact with it. It was really crazy. Like you would right-click here to get a context menu that you had to right-click on, whatever, and buttons. We had lots of buttons. So this persisted for a few years, and then somebody was like, hey, we should add accounting data to this. Like we should totally make an accounting system. And so we watched Introduction to Accounting on YouTube, and we made an accounting system. So that just complicated things a lot more, because now we had all this data from operations, and we had all this data from accounting, and we just kind of smushed it together. And what ended up happening is people didn't like using our software. This is just what ended up happening. Like we made their lives harder instead of easier. And there's a lot of good things in there. I'm super overgeneralizing just for the sake of time, but so towards the end of development, somebody was like, hey, Stewart, you should go redesign some things. Like, just go redesign some things. And so I was like, okay, that's a good idea. That'd be fun, right? And so I started talking to dispatchers and drivers, and you can sit there. You can move my bag and sit there. It's okay. Anyways, I started talking to dispatchers and drivers and field hands and C-level people and all sorts of things. And what I found out was we overcomplicated things, right? Like, we were like, they really want to know the tire pressure of their truck as they come into the rig, and they really didn't care. So what it really came down to was dispatchers needed to be able to take employees and equipment and pair it up with a location while a guy was on the phone, and then hit a button, and then the driver needed to know that he was supposed to go and do this thing. And that was really it. And he had to get a signature. And so we had like all this crazy data, And what we really needed was this little tiny piece. And yes, the other stuff was important, but basically built something that was really kind of like, it gave C-level people what they wanted, but the average person didn't, they hated their job because of it. And so we'd kind of missed our mark. And so what I learned from that is that we should always start with the experience. When you sit down to solve a design problem, you should start with the experience, because you're solving problems. You are you're not just like making something look pretty. You're actually solving a problem. So you got to start with the experience. So you got to figure out, who are you designing something for? Like for us at Nine Collective, we didn't really know. Like we didn't understand the people we were designing for. So you want to understand who you're designing for. So like if you're going to build a portfolio, who are you making that portfolio for? Is it for you? Is it for your colleagues? Is it to get a job? Like, who's going to be looking at that portfolio? And so that kind of like rolls into some of the next points. What are those people expecting to see? Like, if you're doing it for a job, I bet people are going to want to see like case study type things, right? Like, they're going to want to see, how did you solve a problem? Not just that you solved a problem. How did you do it? What kind of code did you write? So what are they expecting? Next, I skipped this one. What's the appropriate aesthetic? Like, are you building something that's like business class and it just needs to be clean, bare bones to the point? Or are you building something that's like a website? Is it a brochure? Does it need crazy images and great colors and things like that? And then finally, what are your users' previous experiences? So that kind of goes into like, what are they expecting? But like, what kind of experience did they have? And this is all stuff that you can go research and find out. You can generalize. There's ways to kind of like assume things and generalize and whatnot. But these are the things you want to take into consideration when you're approaching a design problem. You don't want to just walk up and go, I like that thing, and I think I'm going to copy it. That doesn't always work out that well. So that kind of leads into the next point, which is start on paper. It's really easy to think about, oh man, I have this computer, it's this crazy thing, and I should totally just start right here because it's a computer and it's clean and green and I'm not going to kill a tree, or I don't know if that's what you mean. But anyways, you should always start on paper. And the reason is because it's so much easier to draw things on paper. It's so much easier to just get your idea out there. At this point in the game, it doesn't matter what things look like at all. Just get your ideas out there, doodle, sketch, draw a unicorn if you want, draw little like trees around your sketch. It doesn't matter at this point in the game. You're going to want to get ideas out, and you're going to get them out fast. You're going to do like brain maps. You're going to want to like draw really crappy sketches, like a box with a line through it, that sort of thing. You're going to want to sketch out user flows. So those are like, those great little things where you have like a box and a little line that comes down to like a triangle and that sort of thing. Those are really helpful. I know that's kind of cliche, but they're really, really helpful to get a grip on the big picture of things, that from the home page, clicking this thing goes to this page, which goes to that page, and oh, look, we can put this little interaction right here, and like that sort of thing. So you want to do that kind of thing. You want to go through that sort of process. And then finally, you can start drawing mocks this way, like really rough mock-ups. Like, this is kind of what I think the page is going to look like. This is going to help you get down like what should be here, what should not be here, and what's the order. Because when you get into writing code, a lot of times you get hung up on writing the code itself. Like, especially if you're learning, you're like really like worried about like, did I write this right? Is it semantic? Is this function functioning? What is this error? Like, you get hung up on those sorts of things, and so you start to skip this kind of thing. You start to skip the experience part. You start to skip the frame of the house, basically, if you're building a house. And finally, have fun. Have a lot of fun, because you shouldn't be doing this if it's not fun. You just find a new hobby. So then moving on, kind of like in the structure of things, we're going to move into typography. Typography is the foundation of good design. Like, if you had a white screen and great typography, people will look at it and go, God, that's great design. Apple does it all the time, and people are like, they know design, and it's good typography on a white screen. There's a designer out there. His name is Dan Petty. I call him the man. He's amazing. He says that great design starts with good typography and great images, and he's absolutely right. An image and type can really just make a design. So I have a few little tips up there. So the first one is pick a font, right? Like, know what kind of font you need. So unless you're building some sort of application that's going to be used like mass across lots of things, business level application, don't just use default fonts. We live in a day and age where you can pick a font. So think about that and pick a font that works for you. kind of think that through. So pick the right font. Don't pick the wrong font. So like if you're building something and it's like a technology sort of thing, don't use Times Roman, right? Like that's really kind of speaks like business. Also don't use Comic Sans. That's kind of like the running joke, but it speaks like childlike, right? Like use something like Helvetica, Roboto, something like that, right? Like those are technology type fonts. Like it just kind of speaks technology when you see it. So you kind of want to research that and kind of like understand that a little bit. And I know like a lot of you guys aren't going into design specifically. This is just kind of to help you get a grasp. And so next, I'd say use a grid to size your typography. Don't just wing it. Don't be like, that's going to be 84 pixels and then that's going to be 24. Like, don't wing it like that. Like, come up with a system. There's tools out there that do that for you. There's one I absolutely love called gridlover.net. You put in a font size and it will spit out a line height and it will give you padding, margin, font sizes for all the tags. There, you'd be good. And so next, I'd say learn the differences between font styles. There's a time and a place to use mono fonts. There's a time and a place to use serif, sans serif, all of that stuff. That's designer lingo talk that if you wind up as a front-end dev, somebody might just kind of toss and be like, you should be using a sans serif font. And you go, what is that? Let me Google that real quick. So I would say learn the differences just so you can kind of speak the language. And so when you're making your own thing, I would also say stick to 2 to 3 font families. Don't go crazy. Don't have like 10. One that's going to slow your page load down. 2, it's just confusing. So pick something and be consistent. You could use a service like Typewolf where you can say, I want to see this and this, and it'll pair up fonts for you. So if you're like, I have Roboto, what would be a good font to go with Roboto? It'll like, try these fonts. And some of them you might have to pay for. You can skip those. There's free ones. But great typography is going to be the foundation of good design. And so I want to talk about Life Church real quick. I went to church this morning and I was like, this is like perfect. So I've tossed this in here. So do you see their typography here? They have a clear header, they have paragraph tag, and everything kind of works together. But what I'm really impressed with is this is the little thing that they hand out at church. Same font, same aesthetic. This is a little card that they say, go invite somebody to church. Same font, same aesthetic. This is their little thing talking about giving money. Same font, same aesthetic. This is their little thing talking about baptism. Same font, same aesthetic. This is a little card that they gave to my daughter to give to her friends that has a map of how to get there. Same font, same aesthetic, has a little thing on the back. And I could keep going, like the sticker that I stuck on the back of my son to take him to Sunday school. Same font, same aesthetic. Consistency across the board. Like it's just, it makes beautiful design. So regardless of images and colors and everything like that, you have this consistent feeling that just walks through here. So that's typography, and you can see how, like if you go work someplace, you can see how like the marketing side can tie into the development side, and you can get this nice feeling across the board. Google has done this. I remember when Google used to make my eyes bleed because nothing looked the same, and they had Android. Can you guys remember that a few years back? Before Android looked cool, and it was like everybody and their dog was like, Android's so great because I can do whatever I want to it, and they did, and it was really ugly, and it was really hard to use. Samsung is still there. I can't stand Samsung's like interface because I pick it up, and I'm like, why do I have 3 mail apps? I don't understand. Like what? And they're like, but that's version 1. So anyways, Google's really good at that now. So is Apple. Like you go look at anything you get. DJI is really good at this. I mean, it's just like across the board, everything is one family. So next, let's talk about grids and spacing. As you get into building things, you're gonna find that a grid is like it's like the framework on the house, right? It's gonna help. You're gonna love it. So I'm gonna say 12-column grid. If you're getting started, get to know the 12-column grid, love it, and just embrace it. Don't try to break it. Don't fight it. Go find a good one. Foundation has a good one. Bootstrap has a really good one. If you're going to be building these in like some sort of program like Photoshop or Illustrator or Sketch or something like that, there's tons of free grids out there that you can get that are 12-column grids. You can get like 6 columns. 12 columns gives you the most options. So I would say 12-column grid, go 960.gs. That's the original one back in the day. I remember learning about it at Refresh OKC, and I was like, whoa, mind blown. So anyways, 12-column grid. Hunt that down. So next, I would say vertical rhythm is really, really important. It's what will set you apart, visually speaking, from just any other like developer, because a lot of people don't pay attention to it. Vertical rhythm is the space in between things, right? So it's like the vertical space in between elements. So in between like any tag, the space below it and above it, that's your vertical. If you use a grid to build your typography, this will naturally come along with it. And so you compare your typography vertical grid up with your horizontal layout grid, and you can start having really nice looking things. So give things breathing room. When I was in art school, they used to talk about white space, and they would talk about how important it was, and we would take these posters and we would put these posters up and critique, and our teacher would just walk by and just like rip them off the wall, and she'd be like, that's terrible, that's horse crap, that's terrible, start over. And her big thing all the time was, you're putting too much information on this page. Like, there's too much information on this poster. You need to let it breathe. And you're like, wait, what? Is this wine? Do we need to let it breathe? What? And she's like, you got to let it breathe. You got to give it room. What's the most important thing? Put it in the middle and take everything else away. And so that's what we did with posters, and that same thing applies to web design. So think about if you take your portfolio, for example, and you have your projects, and you just cram everything into one area, it's going to be really confusing. But if you break it up and you let it breathe, then, if you break it up and you kind of isolate it with white space, it makes sense. They're like, this is a project, I should click on it, because there's nothing competing for its attention. So let things breathe, give it white space. And finally, I'd say learn to show and what to hide, right? So just because there is data there, and just because there's something that could be on the page, doesn't mean it needs to be on the page, and it doesn't mean it needs to be right there on the page. Maybe it could be down on the page. Think about like an email client. I'm thinking specifically of like Google's inbox, right? All the stuff that's on Outlook that confuses the snot out of me in Outlook when I pull up Outlook at work is not there in Inbox. Because in Inbox, I'm supposed to read a message and hit reply. It doesn't matter if I want to like reply to all or all this other stuff. All those options are there. They're just kind of buried away under another menu. So just because something can be on the page doesn't mean it should be, right? That's the good old Jurassic Park question. Just because we can doesn't mean we should, right? Is anybody, am I old? Is it like, nobody? We'll find a way. So this is the grid from Foundation. It's a 12-column grid, and typically with something like Foundation, you can pull this down from their Git repo. You can install it with NPM. You can basically get it any way you possibly want it. You can get Sass files. You can get straight CSS. But you can customize this. You can customize the gutters in between each column. That's what that's called. So you can customize that space. You can make it wider, smaller, whatever. It's typically responsive. It's going to fill up to about 1440 pixels wide, and then as you go down, it will respond to different screen sizes, and the columns will combine to, and then the content will break. So you have to plan that out a little bit. Here is something called gridlover.net. It's what I use to scale typography. Up in the top left, you can see I've set it to 16 pixels. That's just your default size. And then I bumped the line height to 1.5. And then I picked the golden ratio for the scale factor. And so you can see over on the right, I have it in CSS because that's how I read things. You can see where they've just taken all the different text tags and they have set sizes for them. They've set line height for them, and they've set margin bottom, I believe. And so visually, you can see how things overlap there. Oh, man. So that's an example of kind of like vertical. You can see how things stack up space-wise. So moving on to everyone's favorite is colors. This one is more of a kind of a science than, or not a science. This is more of kind of like personal than like I can't just tell you do this one thing. But I can give you some tips. The first one is don't use default colors unless you mean to. They're typically like super bright and super bold and kind of annoying. I use them for like testing things like, is this showing up on the page? Background lime, you know, and it's like, yes, there it is. It's this big lime thing on the page. What's really funny is when you accidentally forget to take that out and it goes to production, or you did take it out and somebody's Git commit overwrote yours and then it went to production. So that's always fun. But don't be afraid of colors. Just don't go crazy, right? Like, you don't want a rainbow on your page. You want to limit yourself. I would say don't pick more than 5 colors just because it can get confusing. It's just like typography, the more you put in, the more complex it gets because the brain has to go, now what does that color mean? Why is that there? If you're building a site for a brand, use the colors that come from the logo, right? Or like if you have marketing like Life Church did, use similar stuff across the board. You don't want to be like, man, they use this sweet red color in the logo, but I think I'm going to use purple because I like that better. Your boss is probably going to come up and go, why is that purple? What is that doing? And then your designer, if you're a front-end developer, your designer is going to be like, I didn't do that. It wasn't me, it was him. It'd be great, right? If you're building a web app, remember that colors have meaning. There's kind of a thought behind that. So like if you're building something where you have validation, a lot of times red means error, delete, danger, problems. Green means go, right? Like if you're driving, it's like save, go, complete, check it off the list. Blue usually means it's an action. That's why a lot of times links are blue on web pages. So remember that. Also remember that like colors like orange and red, they're going to grab your attention, right? So the more orange and red you stick on a page, the harder it gets to process that page because your brain is like, that's important, I should look at it. That's important, I should look at it. And if you have too much orange or too much red on your page, your brain will go, God, there's so much going on, I don't know what to do. Somebody help me. So just a few other tips is don't use black, just straight black, like 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. It's not as easy to read as like a light gray, like 1C, 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 and I'm just pulling something out of the air there. But a dark gray is always a lot easier to read than black on white. Like the contrast is so high there. There's apps out there, just like there is with typography. There's apps out there that can help you with color. Adobe Color is one. You can literally put just about anything into Adobe Color, and it'll spit out 4 extra colors for you with, in whatever format do you want them in. You want them in RGB, you want them in hex, you want them in HLSA, you want them in stuff for Android or iOS, they got you. Open Color is a thing. It's a little project out there. I don't know. It just basically takes one color and gives you like 12 or so, maybe 10 steps of that color, and they all work together. Google's Material Design Colors is fantastic. They give you colors, and you can, you've probably seen it before, but it's like a giant rainbow of squares. So that's a great resource to use. And I would say lean on those, especially if you're new, because if you're new, color can really slow you down. If you can take somebody's color palette and kind of adapt it, then you can speed things up. Next, I want to talk about images. Images, you've heard it said that pictures, what do they say? Pictures speak 1,000 words or something like that. They should tell a story, right? Images should help tell the story of what's going on the page. So like in a business application, you might not have a whole lot of images. Like we didn't have any images in our application at 9 Collective. It was just like this giant wall of text and field sets and stuff. There wasn't really a need for that. You're not going to go dump images into Excel, are you? That's built for like calculating data, right, Aaron? So images should complement the content that are there, right? Like this one, I put an image in there with a guy holding a camera because I'm talking about pictures. So there's a guy taking a picture of a row, whatever. So they should help tell a story. Is the copy on your webpage talking about using a phone, solving problems with phones? You should probably use something that has a phone in it, right? Or like a person holding a phone. Look at people like smiling, stuff like that. Like people smiling is really good for conversion. People your mind sees that and is like, oh, hey, look, somebody's smiling. They must be happy. I'm going to be happy with that thing too. It's just psychology stuff. But images should help tell a story. Images should also be high quality. Like you don't want to go get like some junky little like pixelated image that doesn't fit and then like stretch it and then stick it up there. That looks really unprofessional. So you don't want to do that. Images should be high quality, high resolution. By high resolution, I just mean big, right? Because on a screen, everything is going to be 72 dots per inch. unless you have like one of those cool retina screens, then they're going to be a little bit bigger. But regardless, you just want as big of image as you can possibly get, and then you can scale it down from there. So images should complement the design and the content. And finally, there's places where you can get free images. So like this one I got at Unsplash, which is just unsplash.com. They just have a ton of free images, and they're literally free. You don't pay for them. You don't have to credit the author, and you can use them anywhere in any way you want. And a lot of times it's like professional photographers put stuff up there that's like they didn't get paid for, that's just like practice stuff, and so they stick it up there. And it's pretty cool. I mean, it helps if you credit them somehow, but you don't have to. So there's several websites like that now. That's kind of a fad. So there's several websites where you can get great photography. And finally, I'd say don't be afraid of it. Like, images are great, so don't be afraid to use images to help sell your content. And so next, I want to talk about like sweat the small stuff, right? Like, it's the little things that set your site apart from the like 40 that your users already seen, right? If you're building a portfolio to get a job, like what kind of you've taken into consideration what kind of job you're looking for. Maybe it's professional. You want to make it look as professional as possible because that's who you're going after. You don't want it to look like, a MySpace, right? Maybe you do. I don't know. So you don't have to be like necessarily good at design. You just want to make sure that you look at the small details. And if I can make this work. Next, I would say practice. Practice. Like, just like writing code, you're not just going to like walk out there and be good at design. Like, it's not going to happen. It takes time. It takes effort. The stuff I talked about is like a basics, and when you start doing it, it's like, oh man, this isn't quite as easy as I thought it was going to be. And so you got to get in there and you start working, and you just have to keep practicing it over and over and over again. So I would say if you want to practice, go grab a program like Figma. It works on any platform. It works in the web. It's a layout design program. You can build anything you want. It's got a free tier. I'd say if you're development minded, go grab something like Bootstrap or Foundation, and then go over to Dribble with 3Ds, and just find like something that looks cool to you and start trying to build it. Like, start using your coding skills to try to build something like that. Nothing's stopping you. You just have to go try, right? Like, the only thing really getting in your way is you saying maybe, oh, I don't know how to do this, or I'm not good enough to do this or something. So you are who you choose to be, so go try to build whatever you want. And that's all I got. Whee, there we go. There's my desktop. So does anybody have any questions? Yeah, I know. I probably went a little fast there. But yeah, go ahead. So what she asked was, why did I get into design? I got into design because I like to make stuff. It doesn't matter what it is. When we did my senior year in high school, we did this little English project where we had to like take all the stuff we had written all year long and put it into this little book. And everybody spent the like 3 weeks they had like compiling all that stuff and like perfecting it. And I spent 3 weeks building in Photoshop this like themed little notebook thing. So I just like to make stuff. I have a graphic design background. So whether it's print or video or web, I just like to create stuff. And so that's why I got into design in the first place. And then when I was at 9 Collective, I started as a graphic designer, and our front-end designer left, and they were like, hey, guess what? You get to be a front-end designer, or you get to leave. And I was like, okay, sweet. So some of the problems that I talked about in our little application we had were actually my fault because I didn't know what I was doing. Any other questions? Everybody got it? That's awesome. Sweet. All right, well. All right, there we go.